How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Stretch the kindness, brush with madness. Is it sadness or just a show? Then go, 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 go. Then go, 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 go. Then go, 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 go.
Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show.
That was incredibly creative. You almost sounded like a seagull to me. So could you introduce our guest for tonight?
Absolutely, Dr. Joe. Tonight we have Mr. Jake Wheeler. Jake Wheeler is an Emmy Award-winning creator and has storytelling experience across a wide variety of formats, from original series, branded content, physical products, and publishing. He has won a number of advertising awards and has created content for Comedy Central, Sports Illustrated, Viacom, and hundreds of blue-chip brands. The Gullfather, Birdsy Seagull, is his debut book. Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Good. I'm glad you're here. What a clever title, The Gullfather. So, Jake, there's so much going on here. Can you just first tell people a little bit about how you came up with this idea of the book?
Yeah, it's it came from real life in some ways, right? Jeff, my partner, my writing partner, I've been working with for about 20 years. We'd kind of ridden the roller coaster of doing some Hollywood stuff, doing advertising stuff, and you go through these highs and lows of finding brilliance and then getting beat up and then something you think is great and then it falling apart. And at some point you just kind of go back to basics. You're like, does something strike you as funny, as odd, as so bizarre, it's brilliant? And Jeff lives in Connecticut by the beach, and he was watching seagulls one day with his daughters, and he was kind of struck by their mobster-like behavior, and how, and very much so, like, one will distract. They're very intelligent, and obviously they become very adept at stealing food and bamboozling people on the boardwalk, and he was thinking of the famous mobster, Birdsy Seagull, Bugsy Seagull, right? And said, what about a Birdsy Seagull, right? A sort of a captain of like bird mobsters. And we were kind of talking about it. And we said, it's so dumb, it's kind of awesome. And I think what we do with ideas is then you just play with it, right? And you start kind of making mobster sounds over the birds, and you voice them over as they're doing their action. And you do it long enough, you say, at times you say, okay, that was just a funny idea. That was a funny use of 20 minutes. Or I think this could be something. I think if you developed it the right way, right? Could there be a crime family? Could they have a goal? Could they, could they be a family? Could they, just come to life and be dynamic? And would you want to follow them? And if so, how would you do it? And yeah, so we just started riffing on that. And the more we did it, the more real it kind of felt. And you get ideas to a point where you say, the idea deserves to be given its due process, right? Before you kill it or you set it aside. And that's what we did. And it just kept being fun. And then we took it to, we looked for a good illustrator, and you take it to an illustrator, and at every step of the process, you say, is this crazy? Is this dumb? Of course it's dumb, but is it good? Is it good dumb? Is it good silly? And at every point in the process, we got really good feedback. So, and our illustrators immediately kind of took to it, and we're drawing up characters, and that bolstered it. It just kept going and going until we said, hey, I think it's a book, and I think we're going to publish this book. And here we are.
And the arc of the book is so interesting. How did you come up with that?
The arc or the art?
The arc, the beginning, the middle, the end, where it's going.
Yeah, it's what did Nabokov say? Like the secret wings by which these things grow. You kind of, it's part instinctual, right? We all sort of have a nose for story. I think it's a very human thing. And then part of it, you have to be a bit deliberate about it. But it was, what do they want? What is this? What could a mobster seagull want? And we're trying to create it for an age appropriate audience. And he wants to be good. He wants to keep he wants to protect the family, right? And yet that's not comedy, right? And so he has to do it maybe despite a lot of flaws and despite a lot of noise and a lot of well-meaning, but chaos, right? A lot of people acting through their flaws. And so how does he become the glue that keeps this together? And yet let some of this sort of hilarity ensue. And because the arc's a bit bizarre, right? There's a wooden security seagull that's scaring all the seagulls. And it's, you kind of play in this line of, is it childlike, but not childish, right? And having a villain that's also wooden is kind of strange, but it's a formidable enemy for them, and it leads to it leads to them having to really kind of stretch their resources to rescue a friend, right? And so you kind of start with this need, and what complicates the need, again in just a way that's consistent with the characters, birds, a way that's consistent with the setting, a way that's consistent with like the age dynamic. And you say, okay, well, who do we have that's going to try to address these flaws, right? And how does it go wrong? Because like all of us, they're flawed too. And as it goes wrong, when the stakes get high, you really kind of see what people are made of, and you see what Birdsy's made of. And he says, okay, well, what can we do to really remedy this? And more things go wrong, and finally something goes right. And it all kinds of a lot of the things kind of come together magically in any story, right? And you say, I don't know why I picked this character to do that or this one to do that, but you're like, oh, I see how it kind of comes back around at the end, and how it's, you wonder sometimes in any storytelling how much of it really happens here and how much of it comes out of the ether,
For me, there was this moment. I don't want to be give stuff away, but it's page 25 in the PDF file that I got, where the Gullfather is talking, and he says, there's trouble in every direction. Humans are moving in, trashing our beaches. They polluted our wetlands to the west. Smog blankets our sky, and packs of lawless strays roam the boardwalk. We have a duty to fix it. I mean, that's pretty powerful, Jake.
Yeah, and I think, look, we live in a world of content, right? It's around every corner. And as a creator yourself, you could look, we could just make another thing, and it could be, yes, the table stakes are, it has to be adventurous and funny, but some way you say, why? What's the raison d'etre for ourselves, right? As people, I'm an uncle, Jeff's a father, why add this to the sea of things that are out there? And so not only does your character sort of justify their role and their sort of purpose, but in a way you're doing it as writers yourselves, right? And you're speaking to a certain audience, right? We're speaking to, middle grade readers, 8 to 10-year-old kids who are, not just at the age where you want them to kind of read and have fun reading, but to also find values that are maybe resonant, or values that are out there, but in a way that's resonant for them, right? And so this sort of, he's a father figure, and he's a Gullfather, but he's tough, but he's not ruthless. He's not mercenary. It's not for the money. You see that there's this side of a character that's not just tough, but there are reasons underpinning it. There are good reasons why, and there are good reasons why they need to be together to do it. And I think that's an important part. It's a bit of exposition there, but he kind of takes his lieutenants and brings them to this to show them that it's important, so they can see for themselves that it's not vanity, right? It's not a vanity play for him. It's not a profit play for him. And I think, like with any kind of leadership, right, or in any kind of society building, family building, when you show that there's something bigger at play here and you can be part of it, I think that becomes important.
I agree. That's why it really, jumped out at me, or flew out at me, I suppose, because it's about gulls. It's a really important thing, and how we teach kids, value that, I mean, the I am approach is saying we all want the same thing, right? We just want to feel valued by somebody else. And unfortunately, human beings have spent millennia increasing their value by decreasing somebody else's.
Yep.
And then we're astonished that we have the conflict we have. So is there a hope also with the book that we're able to teach kids certain things about value? And
Yeah, I think so. And I think if you look in this crew, they all have value, right? They all add something. And you see it like in a lot of, sort of heist comedy movies, right? Everyone plays that part, but there's value in each of those roles, and they're without any of them, right? It wouldn't work. Something wouldn't work. And then even sort of the gruffest of them is redeemed not through somebody saying, "Oh, hey, you're valuable because of X, Y, and Z," but because they saw their own value and they chose to be heroic, right? Or they chose to stand up for something. And like that comes from an internal place, right? And some of our acting out comes from our flaws as well, right? From not knowing if we're valued. And you see it with the one-winged seagull, right? He kind of breaks bad and disobeys orders because he feels, he's always felt self-conscious about this thing, and getting that wing would make him valuable, right? Would make him like others, would make him fly again. But that's not his real value. And his kind of real value he finds, in himself when he's sort of in that cage. Yeah, it's just, we all have roles to play, and they don't necessarily match up with the roles we see on TV, right? There's different types of heroes, and I think you're starting to see a little bit more of that. I think there was an era of like Marvel, right, where there was always a big hero attacking a big villain and saving the world for probably the 1,000th time, and that was fine. Maybe that's what we needed at the time. But you're starting to see more the idea that there's just different ways to be heroic, right? And we all have that in us, and we all just have this inherent value, and it can sort of be, we don't need to be validated from the outside, but we can project it outside onto the world, and we don't need sort of permission for that. We don't need to measure up to a certain bar for that.
Well, I mean, there are many ways to be heroes, and you've had such a illustrious career. Were there certain points in your career that you just realized you're in the right place at the right time, just feeling like a hero yourself, or maybe have heroes who've helped you along the way?
Yeah. There are times, and sometimes you don't recognize them in the moment, you recognize them later, that somebody took a chance on you, and that somebody was being a father figure to you or a role model to you. And if you can look back, you see the pattern that had happened a lot, and you maybe don't notice it again at the time, and maybe you don't appreciate it in the right way. But the fact that you do recognize it at some point, and you say, I can do that for other people. I can pass that on, right? That did make a difference. And yeah, I mean, everything from, you had a really good Boy Scout leader at one point when I was in the Scouts, and I was an Eagle Scout, and really kind of instrumental in teaching me a lot of things, and helping me go on adventures, right? Rock climbing and spelunking and things like that. And really kind of championed. We were, very much a group of outsider kids, right? And kind of made us feel special and enabled us. And the idea of being able to empower people, I think is really strong. And I had this is a funny, interesting story. I had a Latin teacher at one point, and he was the best teacher, like best teacher in the world. Everyone loved him, and we've heard those stories. Those are great. Everyone's had a great teacher, but he did one thing that was really interesting once. He would let us all joke around all the time. But one time in one class, somebody made fun of somebody else, and he lost it. I mean, he didn't lose, but he put his foot down. He's like, that's like, let me be abundantly clear. That's the line. We can have as much fun as we want. We don't make fun of other people. like unambiguous. And that, I mean, you're like, oh, that's a cool teacher. Let's just do whatever. And he's like, no, I don't let you do whatever. That is one thing I do not, under any circumstance, let you do. And it's really powerful. It was because he could be so nice and so friendly and so engaging. And then at the right moment, he could be the absolute grown up and say, no, we do not do this.
I'm getting goosebumps from that story, Jake. That's a great story.
Yeah, it was really, I remember to this day. And it was that there is a line, and that's our line, and then as kids, that's somebody I really respect told me that's an important value. Okay, now I got to think about that every time this kind of situation comes up, and sometimes in the moment or sometimes after, you're like, oh, that's not what we do. And then in the industry and in getting breaks or not breaks, you bump into people, you get a mentor here and there. We wouldn't have gotten into the industry if somebody hadn't taken a chance on us. And it was a commercial executive producer in the commercial business, and he saw promise, and we weren't trained. We weren't sort of trained in this area. We weren't, I wasn't trained as a writer. I didn't take any creative writing classes, read a lot and did a lot of literature. But it took someone to say, hey, you guys are really funny. You guys seem to have something. When things come up, will you take a shot at them? Now, he didn't give us anything except the opportunity and said, it's up to you if you're really going to be good or not. But I think something's there. And to our credit, we took that encouragement, but we also took the opportunity. And every time something came up for an ad campaign, and I was on Wall Street at the time, we wrote and wrote and wrote. And I'd work 12, 14 hours a day on my Wall Street job, take a taxi down to, I'd go from the, the headquarters in Times Square, and then take a taxi down to, Canal Street, and go to my other world, right?
Yeah.
The Clark Kent Superman, like know
it well.
The production company down on Canal Street with the cool kind of, film industry vibe. And we'd write till 3, 4 in the morning and get up and do it again when there was something on. And so, it's a combination of having been encouraged and having been empowered and having somebody see something in you, along with then you deciding, yes, I'm going to take this opportunity. Yes, I'm going to adopt this value. Yes, I'm going to give back because people did it for me. So it becomes a balance or not a balance, a combination of those two things that sort of propels you forward.
A difficult balance to have too, right? Between all that work. I mean, if you're up till 3, 4 in the morning, then you got to go back to work. How did you find the energy to do that?
Youth.
Yes, I remember youth.
Yeah, it's getting hazier by the day, but yeah, and I think we for better or for worse, when you're younger, you tend to think you see a lot of these things that if you can just get there, you think it'll be the answer, right? And so you won't sleep. You'll do any, well, if I get this, if I do this, and I'll get that. And there's something to be said for doing it, right? There's something to be said for, getting your hands dirty, getting the fingers a little bloody. But there's also something to be said for going through the process and seeing that, there's no there sometimes, right? Or the wherever you go, there you are. And it's kind of the process itself, which can mold you, but not so much the destination.
Yeah, as many people say, it's the journey.
Yeah. And I think that's real. I think, I found that out in the finance industry, and we kind of found it out a little bit in the ad industry. We'd get far enough sort of down a road to say, I don't know if that road really leads where I want, but it also might not lead anywhere. It's if you're trying to, and this really is kind of a big part of creativity. If you live for those ends, the ends aren't satisfying. The process is satisfying. If you hate writing, but you really want to be a famous writer someday because you think that'll answer all your problems will still be there. Same with directing or cinematography or anything else. But when you say, I love this process, I love this challenge. In fact, you get to a place where I love being stumped. I love not being able to figure this out. It is driving me bananas. And I'm so happy being driven bananas. I think I'm going to solve it. And then when you do, so you find a solve, maybe in a script or a scene or just kind of your structure, sometimes it doesn't guarantee it's going to sell. It's just all you know is that you did something better than you could have yesterday, and that you enjoyed it, and you enjoyed the challenge.
That's another life lesson for so many folks. Does that, do you think, show up in Gullfather?
Yeah, let me think here.
I mean, there's a lot of perseverance, you know.
Yeah, I think that's going to be kind of the sort of this, resilience is something that has come to me in my older age, right? And I think you're going to see that a lot from them, right? What's the resilience factor? And the ability to learn we can do things again. Sometimes we learn a lot of things, but we don't learn that we can do things, right? And so we don't become resilient, right? And then we sort of depend on Google for our answers, or now it's Chat GPT, or we depend on TV to be there or food to be there. Everything is we're so used to it being there, and but the idea of resilience, right? The idea that learning, having resilience can actually be a lot of fun, right? That be able to withstand trials can be actually really empowering and kind of fun.
Well, as a child psychiatrist, we certainly look for resilience, and what we found is the child who has had at least one person that believes in them, one person at least that sees them as valuable, that's part of resilience, is sort of being able to recognize that you're okay, that you can do this.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? Because resilience doesn't come out of a box. You're sort of led to it and through it, and through that you begin to discover things about yourself and your capabilities. And you need that. You kind of need that first person or an early caregiver or someone to say, "Look, you can do it. You're doing it," right? And how often you see in Little League, right? You don't really get coaching; you get yelling. You say, "No, but you got to let the ball hit the bat." Like, I don't know what that means. I can't process that as a kid, right? Some of the coaching you get, and then it's just done at a higher volume. You're like, but that's not belief, and that's not instruction. You're telling me obvious things, but you're not helping me do those things. But once you're kind of helped through it, right? Taught how and done in a way that you can kind of believe in it, then you can adopt it, right? And you can adopt it yourself, and you can build on it, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, you're targeting a really impressionable age group with this book. How'd you decide to go after that group? Because the content could be for any age.
Yeah, and some people do that well, like Pixar especially, right? Everyone in the theater's happy, right? It can be for anyone. It's mostly for the kids, but the adults are going to have a pretty good time watching a Pixar movie, and we hope that's the case here. And in fact, one of the early thought process behind it, as we were kind of angling that down and really kind of saying, okay, who is it for? There was a thought about how a lot of dads aren't really invested in the reading life of their kids. And a lot of boys, there's beginning to be a big reading gender gap. Boys are stopping reading, and they're starting to have adverse educational impacts. And so it was kind of like, what would boys want to read? We were boys once. What did we want to read? And what would a dad maybe buy for a boy? Buy for a son and say, hey, this is our thing, right? This is that thing that we laugh at, right? There's a lot of great kids books out there, but I see dads rolling their eyes and are like, for me, I don't have kids, but my nephews come and stay with me in Montana for a bit, and they have some TV shows on where I'm just like, I don't like, this is chaos. I don't know what's going on, and I can't process it. But something like this, right? It's still, that sort of straddles that line to say there's silliness, there's a little bit of chaos, but it's not childish. The situations they face are grown-up situations, right? That I can as an adult, I want to maybe read this with my nephews or my kids, and as a dad, I can say, oh yeah, this is our thing. This is maybe our book that we talk about. You've got some other book, and I don't know. I just can't relate to it. But this, yeah, I grew up in seeing The Godfather or The Sopranos or whatever else, and I can sort of bond with a light version of that with you, and that can be our thing. So it's pretty intentional, right? To keep it open to that, and building, not just building a relationship with reading, but building a relationship between, fathers and sons, or parents and kids, that they could share around a property, an idea, characters that they could share interest in.
Well, it really is all about relationships. And then, first of all, how do people get this graphic novel?
So it's in, you can pre-order now. I don't think it's quite up on Amazon yet. It should be soon. But in some of the other, I think on Barnes & Noble, you can pre-order. And you can search the Gullfather, Birdsy Seagull. And it should be available at any of your, at any booksellers. You can go to thegullfather.com and email us if you can't find a link somewhere. And we're happy to send you out a link as they become available. The official publication is, I believe, June 14th. It was kind of geared to be something that was right before the summer vacation, something you could pick up, and the kids would be cool reading in the car or on the beach, and they would enjoy it. And so we're slated for a summer release, and I think any point really up until then, you can get in the pre-order queue. Great,
yeah, and we may rebroadcast this show as well as we get closer to the release date. So it's such an interesting creative process. I certainly have written a couple of books, but how did you go about doing this? What is the process with you guys?
Yeah, so I think, like I said before, the first nugget starts with, is there a spark? Is there something joyful in this? Is this, I think a lot of times in creative life, you say, where's the audience? What's the plan? What's the strategy? But I think good stuff always starts with, is there fun? Is there fun here? Right? Could we have, and as you get older and have more demands and more responsibilities, at some point you just say, this has to be fun or I'm not doing it. Like it's just not worth it. Can we make this a joyful experience? And so that's where it starts. And I think particularly with you say, are there characters here? Are there characters people would care about? Are there characters we would care about? And I think you go from there to saying, okay, what do they need? What are they trying to do? Especially with something that we hope is serial, right? We want there to be, 10, 20, 30, 40 of these books. Do you want to spend time with them? That was always my gauge for a sitcom, right? Do people want you in their living room once a week for the next 10 years, right? Do you want to be in their coffee shop like you were in Friends, or do you want to be in Jerry's apartment, right? And I think for me, that's the kind of sort of existential question around, like, does this thing live, right? Do people want to live with these characters as they develop and evolve? And so from there, when you get into graphic novels, it's interesting in that film and the visual arts are different from sort of literature and the very verbal arts. And, Jeff, my co-writer, and I are both very verbal people, but we spend a lot of time now in film and advertising, where you work with cinematographers and art directors. And I think all of us, right, we have our own worldview because that's the only thing we really experience most of the time, right? That what's in our own heads. And you start working with visual people who think different than you, and you see what they can do because they just think so differently. Just the way they see the world, the way they unpack it is so different. And with visual things, you try to let the visuals do a lot of the work. And so that's a bit of a push-pull, right? It's verbal people and people that I came up in reading myth and literature, and you want everything, you want to explain everything, right? You want there to be this exposition or good vocabulary and great dialogue. But in a lot of great movies, and you watch any movie now, just watch the first 10 minutes and sometimes there's only a couple sentences, right? And so the visuals really carry you. And so for us, it was like, okay, graphic novel, graphical, visual novel, verbal. And how do you balance that? And how do you lean on, you lean on your writing partner, which is Jeff, but then you also lean on your illustration and design team. And sometimes you say, okay, no, I really want to give you pretty explicit feedback here. And sometimes you say, show me how you think, show me what you're thinking should happen here. And they'll take a page of dialogue and they'll show how it physically happens with no words. You're like, wow, that's just, you experience the world differently. And then there's something really fulfilling about that. You say that's a great partnership, and that's really interesting that I had to learn trust. And wow, I was rewarded for that trust. I was rewarded for, I decided to lean on you. And one thing was the cover. For a long time, we couldn't crack a cover. We were trying to be prescriptive about, well, it should kind of look like a TV show cover, like Sopranos, but kind of a riff off that. And nothing was coming back great. And finally we said, do what you think a cover should be. Just whatever. Just tell us what you think. And they came back with something like, oh, that's why you're an illustrator. The way you composed it and the way you kind of made it brought the excitement to it and captured what was going to happen in the book on the cover. I wouldn't have been able to think that way. So yeah, it's kind of thrilling to work with somebody that thinks differently.
It's really interesting too to have to sort of really distill the dialogue in this, because with other novels and other things, you get to explain all the stuff and explore, and you want to write so that the audience can see. This is a different art form.
Yeah. And I think there's an old maxim, and I won't be able to attribute it correctly, but they say like in novels, all the drama happens internally. In theater, it happens between like you and the audience, and in movies, it happens in the action. And so you're kind of combining some of those worlds, right? You're like, oh, this is happening inside them, but it's dialogue, it's happening between them, but also it has to be thought of a little bit like a film, right? And and there was something interesting the illustrators did a lot, is they created a lot of really great frames that broke the sort of pane structure, right? That like things leaked between different frames, or they a whole page illustration with no frames, but it still kind of captured the action in little vignettes. The same way we might do in a different way when we're writing, right? A stream of consciousness writing might be akin to some things they did visually in these frames, a stream of action. And you realize that they not only they think different, they trained different. And when you start to kind of respect that and encourage that, it becomes really fruitful. And even as long as we've been kind of doing these types of things, we still learn, not just about the craft, but about ourselves. And that's when you just say, wow, the creative process is so awesome. It's, it's humbling and it's thrilling and I'm learning and you can really be, it's, I don't want to read onto other industries. I'm sure this is true in many other places, but it's one of the industries in which you can really be in awe of your coworkers and really be in awe of your collaborators. And an art director can just do something and you just say, wow, I could look at this all day. Show me 100 of these. I could look at them all day. And, sometimes people turn around and say the same thing to you. Like, that's just really funny. How did you do that? And, part of life, we lose sometimes the ability to find awe in things. And we've seen everything. We've seen every picture. And sometimes you just work with people and you find the awe in their craft. And it's just one of those moments you kind of sit there and take it in and say, this is just fascinating, just enriching.
So, I can't help following that lead. So what did you learn about yourself during this process?
Yeah, I learned, and this is something, I've kind of referenced earlier in the show, how to pull back from the ends and make it more about the means in the process, right? To say, if we're not having fun, if we can't commit to having fun, we're not going to do this. And what else at our age, is kind of, there's things that are as important or more important, but you start to say that's important. That's life, right? That's life. Is even if this goes nowhere, I got to connect with an old partner, and because we hadn't worked together a ton, we worked together. We were for a long time. We were roommates, best friends, co-writer directors. We never. There was probably a 10-year period we were no more than 5 feet from each other the whole time. And then life happens, and I live in Montana, and Jeff lives in Connecticut, and you're working. It's kind of like a band, right? You split up, you work on different projects, things happen. And you reconnect and you say, wow, it's not the how many did you sell? It's the process was rewarding. Connecting with this person that I was so close to for so long, that's rewarding.
So how did you guys reconnect around this? What happened?
We were always kind of, we'd connect now and then, but it was specifically about this. We just started talking about this, and we said, Jeff had written some other graphic novels, and I would kind of consult and advise, or he'd show me some things. So we still trusted each other as a source of, hey, I respect you. I'd love to get your opinion on this. Could you punch up some jokes on that? Hey, what are you finding in working with editors? Are you finding anything good? So we would share a lot of feedback and advice, but it was around this, like, hey, do you want to do something? Yeah, I do. But if we're going to do something, like, let's just really make it worth it. Okay, well, let's just kind of, something's going to bubble up. Let's just keep talking. And then kind of something bubbled up. I'm like, let's run with this. He and I we had done one of the ways we got a start, sort of a real foot in the door, besides the guy who kind of gave us the early opportunity, was we moved to Alabama for 6 months and shot a documentary on college football fans. And it made no sense to other people, and it broke like every rule where we were kind of in our career. Sort of, you just starting to get traction, and I had left a big Wall Street firm to do this, and everyone just assumed we were crazy. And it was some of the most fun we had. It was like you and somebody sort of, let's do this. Let's see where it goes. Like, let's take this road, right? Are you in? I'm in. Okay, let's see where this road goes. That sounds like an interesting life, or an interesting year, an interesting month, right? And maybe it goes nowhere, but man, it's gonna be a fun month. It's a fun year. Maybe it's a fun product. Maybe it becomes a franchise, But looking at it like that, and remembering that when we've gone on some of these runs, we've kind of look at each other and say, "You in? This sounds patently absurd. You're in too, right?" Yeah, I'm in. Let's go. And and then there's some magic out there.
So 10 years of working together side by side. What was some of the highlights of that?
When it was really good, there were times where I can't believe we get paid to do this. There were some, great shoots in the ad industry that we went on, and some of our early pitching around Hollywood, and some of our early meetings with Comedy Central. It's all, you're really starry-eyed at the time, but I can't believe we're doing this. I can't believe, not only am I getting to do this, I'm getting to do it with people I like, and I'm getting to do it while having fun. So the kind of whole, just milieu of it was, you're kind of walking around, and you're working hard, and you're sleep deprived, and you're jumping on every opportunity, but it's also like, this is so crazy. I can't believe we get to do this. And there was a good, I don't know if it was one of the Farrelly brothers that said this, or one of the South Park guys, Matt Stone or Trey Parker, but someone said, what's the benefit of working in a partnership? Because it can be hard, and especially when you're young, and that's why bands break up, right? There's egos, and maybe you don't know how to deal with them when you're young. But it said, it's that one day that you're done fighting the studio, and you're done fighting the world, and you're done fighting everything else, is when that person says, "It's cool, I got it today." It's just, there's that one day where you say, "Oh, that's why I have a partner." That's why, and so you see that over 10 years, you see that a lot. You see someone's like, "Can you got this today?" Or someone, you don't even have to ask. Someone's like, "I got this today. I'm on this." So I think that's probably the sort of the macro highlight of it is having had that feeling and knowing it was there.
And somebody could sense when you just needed the time and say, "I got this."
Yeah. And and I have a few other creative partners in some other lines of work, and there's another guy that does that. He's just so instinctual about it, and he's down in Buenos Aires, and it's just like, brother, chill out. Like, just like, he can tell my tone of voice. He can tell. He's like, he's like, don't sweat it, man. I got it. And you're just like,
that has a lot to do with respect and value and trust, and knowing somebody else. And I don't know how many versions of certain things, and sometimes it's just hard to say, okay, that's not what's right. Was that at all the experience? I mean, the dialogue is so crisp in this graphic novel.
Yeah, it's it was a bit of a problem here, especially because when you can actually see when the dialogue's in your head, and even when you're kind of putting it on paper, it all sounds kind of concise. When an illustrator fills a word bubble with it, you're like, oh my goodness, no, that is overwritten. Let us, and if I could do it again, I'd probably chop even more. And I'd see it in film work, right? Where you have you can see it on a film script somewhat, because you're kind of taught it when you're doing screen stuff. Like, pages should look lean. There shouldn't be a lot of things over 3 or 4 lines long, and unless the scene really calls for it. And so you can kind of visually see, ooh, this is, and other people are going to see this too. This looks like a disaster. And then you start to read it. You're like, no, it makes total sense. Like, and then someone reads it like in a table reading. You're like, oh yeah, it's a disaster. It's a Hindenburg. Let's and then you start to cut it back, and so it still happens. I get maybe it's one of those things you keep getting better at, but Hemingway had a problem with it. He's known for his concise style.
Kill your babies.
What's that?
That's his quote, isn't it? Kill your babies.
Yeah, and there was another one. It was earlier in his career, and he was talking about an editor, and I'd have to look up the exact sort of quote, but he was talking about how there are editors who want you to take out the whole business. He says, and I don't want to be writers that leave out the whole business, right? I want to have it all in there. And a lot of postmodern novels were like that, right? These 1,000-page kind of sprawlers. And it's interesting that Hemingway went from someone who said, like, I'm not going to leave out the whole business. All the business is important, to someone who left out the entire business, and had a really kind of concise and sharp style. And so, yeah, I think you can kind of get there.
Are you there?
I'm not there. No. But I think you become judicious about format, and in different places. If you are writing a novel, you can go longer. Some people want it, right? But that's not licensed to just write whatever, right? So no, you kind of know, okay, I'm going longer here, but I'm adding more action, or can I unsay some things? If it's a graphic novel, you say, look, it's gonna be ink on a page, so I might want to start thinking about it now. And well, if it's film, I'll try to cut it back, and some table reads will show me more. And you know what? Sometimes, and I think it's part and parcel of life as a whole. Can I let go? What can I let go of? Do I need to say? Is there a need within us as writers to articulate and perfectly articulate, and then over-articulate everything? Right? Did I say it right? Are they getting it? And I'll just say it again. And now I just said it twice. What's going on? So I'll say it a third time to clarify that both were right, and then you're over. And can we let go? Can we trust our audience? Can we trust our audience to get it? There's that old maxim of less is more, and Da Vinci's, maybe he said it, simplicity is divinity, or something like that. But can you get there? But you don't have to all the time. You don't have to in every case. A good stand-up comedian, that's all words. You don't read the words, but there's a way to make them work. But a lot of it's context, and none of it's just a license to, kind of just let it all, sprawl out there.
No, it seems like it's really taking tell and making it show in this case, as opposed to like what we're doing now with telepsychiatry. Is it's taking tell and making it show. So instead of somebody just telling me something about what's going on in their world, they can actually show me the picture of their grandmother on their refrigerator. It's so different, but it stimulates all the other associations that happen. And certainly, there's some. One of the early graphic novels I remember was Mouse. Remember M-A-U-S, Mouse?
Yeah.
It's just like mind blowing the way they use the visual part to tell the story.
Yeah. And you start to think of, in your characters, like, not what would they say next? What is this character doing? This character has a need. What are they going to do next, right? This character is going to find out information. Generally, when you find out information, you're told it, but it doesn't have to be the case. And in really good instances, that's not the case. It happens it happens in other ways. And so you have to open up to exploring, how does X happen? What does this person need? So what do they do about it? Not what do they say about it? And that becomes a sort of an internal guide to say, okay, this person wants or needs something. This person's scared. What do they do next? Now, what does a scared person do? What does this character that I'm creating, what do they uniquely do when they're scared or they're jealous, or whatever? They could talk about it. We all do, but that doesn't necessarily make a good narrative, right? So what do they do next? How do they try to achieve this thing in other ways besides just talking about it?
Which is really about a character instead of a caricature, the pivot moments. With that in mind, coming towards the end of the show, but the I am approach, the idea that we're always doing the best we can, influenced by these 4 domains of your home domain and your social domain, the biological domain and the I see, how I see myself, how I think other people see me. Because the domains interact, a small change can have a big effect. We don't need to change everything. Jake, what small change can you recommend to our listeners, given what we're talking about tonight?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a couple of times. I think I'd say to forget the ends and focus on the means, right? I have this saying that the means actually are the ends, right? You can't sort of say, well, we want peace in the future, but we're willing to fight any war to get there. Because at the end, that's all you know, right? Is you don't actually know peace. You haven't practiced peace, right? And so you think about these ends and you think about, well, the end is what I'm going to be. But that sort of necessarily can't be the case, because any end is just who you are in any given moment. And so, what I'd say is that think of life in some ways as a practice, not as something to win, not as something to achieve, not as a place where you get and then and all of a sudden it was over and you get a trophy. Life is just a consistent practice. So what are you going to practice today a little bit? And then from that vantage point, right? I'm going to practice happiness. I'm going to practice writing. I'm not going to be, an Ironman champion, but I'm going to run. I don't know if I'm going to be the greatest writer in the world. I'm going to learn something I like about my writing today. And then tomorrow, if you've learned that, you have a whole new set of things available to you, right? New avenues, new options, just because you did that one thing, because you let go of that end, that hypothetical end, and you don't know if it would ever make you happy or if there's a there. And you bring it back to saying, what can I practice today? Can I practice can I practice connection? Can I practice hugging my dog, right? As opposed, I got to walk my dog and then I got to feed my dog. But I'd like to get over here and can you just bring it back to the now? And I know that's a very cliche thing, but make it a practice. I want to be this right now, not in 20 years, not next year. I want to be a happier person right now. So I'm just going to do something about that. And then that'll get you somewhere. That'll get you somewhere, and you can't really imagine what that is. And it'll be different than that hypothesized end. But yeah, that's what I'd say. Let go of that end and be that thing today.
And I think that leads into the second truth of the I am, that, everyone is interested in what you think or feel about them, which has an effect on their biological domain. Because, it feels different when you feel respected or disrespected. So what this means is you control no one, but you influence everyone. You get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Jake Wheeler, what kind of influence do you want to be?
Yeah, I'd like to think that a lot of our best teaching isn't by what we say, right? This is back to what we kind of said earlier, but by what you do. And through different life experiences, different people can model different lessons. And I think for me, and you talk about value, there was a process I had to go through where, because I do a lot of different things, I write some graphic novels, I'm working on some picture books, I've done some films, I started in finance, I love philosophy and psychology, and people, but who are you? What do you do? And in order to communicate value, right? We try to sum it all up, and I'm on this path and it's going to lead to this, and I'm okay. And in fact, I'm valuable. And at some point you just have to say, like, I'm just valuable because I'm valuable, right? And for me in particular, it was embracing what I call an undefined or unstructured life. And I think that's very hard to do, right? Because we if you meet someone, their parents want to know what you do. Are you going to be a good partner or spouse? Or, where is your value, right? It's always kind of being implicitly asked. And at some point you just kind of say, I am super undefined, and it's wonderful. Like, someone asked me the other day, like, what are you? I was like, I think I'm a philosopher. It doesn't make sense, but you're like, it's great. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to add up to some narrative about me that communicates value. There's the universe is unstructured, right? It's just like there can be something brilliant about just living undefined and thriving in the undefined. And we have a really hard time with that. And I think that's what I'd like to start communicating through my example, is that, like, it can be magical. It can be bizarre. It can be such a just joyous ride, but you have to embrace it, or you can't. And I think I ran from it for a long time, and I wanted to find that hook, and now I don't. And it's fantastic.
It sounds freeing in many ways as well.
Yeah, you start to kind of really find that freedom in not needing to be packaged for consumption.
Well, the I am is saying that we're all doing the best we can, and what that really translates is that everyone is valuable, and at every and any moment in time, you can remind someone of their value. Whenever you do that, you increase your own value. And I really appreciate your time with us tonight, Jake, because I think you have remarkable wisdom to share, and the book is going to be great. I cannot wait to hear the impact that kids experience when they're reading it. So.
Well, I'm glad you all enjoyed it, and I'm glad you had fun with it. That's primary for us, and it was wonderful meeting you both and speaking with you this evening.
All right, folks. Tom, we'll see you next week. All right. Good night, everyone.